and it was a wonderful break for me. And I'm excited for 2025. When we look forward to 2025, as I wrote in my report here, um, when I think forward, what's right in front of me and what I feel most intently right now is the legislative session, because especially right now, it feels very messy. It's a big process. There's lots of moving parts. It's not just the legislature, right? We just got the governor's budget, and there's all kinds of departments and executive branch functions that really all crystallize and come together as we go through the first part of the year and ends with a legislative session that ends at the end of June. And that's when we really know what happened. And obviously, by that time, the school year is over and the next one's upon us. And so it's a lot of estimating and guesstimating through the process and trying to make the best decisions we can with the information that we have. And it's right upon us. So that's front and center for me. Also front and center for me is that across our region, our four-county region, our 20 school district boards are getting set to hear about the ESD and to make decisions about our local service plan, which, as the board is aware, we have unanimous support from our district superintendents for, which is a feat unto itself when you can get the Jewels and the Napas to agree with the Beavertons and the Hillsboroughs, at least from the leadership perspective, about how we should be supporting the district. So I feel very pleased about that, happy about that. And now it goes to school boards. And it goes to school boards fast. So obviously, everybody just came back from a holiday, and then we're in week two, right, of a week. And so on many district calendars, including ours, week two is board meeting night. And so tonight we have board meetings happening right as we speak now, where our local service plan is being evaluated. We even had one on Monday, by the way. Uh, so um, so we'll see how that goes. Next week we'll be in Beaverton. And then I saw that Tillamook has also requested, that came in today, I believe Tillamook has requested a presentation as well. So we will, as these things come in, I will contact individual board members where you have represented, where you represent that community, and invite you, if your schedule allows, to join me at some of those meetings. Um, it is a lot of work. It makes for lots of late evenings for a lot of the staff, including me, but it is actually really invigorating, I find. Even when school boards ask lots of hard questions, because the work that we do and our staff does across the region is really important stuff. And it's easy to brag about the work that we do. So I really enjoy it. I hope you get a chance to join me in doing that as well. Also, coming up in 2025, we've got our Antquak Early Learning Center is going to be opening. And in that work, I just want to appreciate a bunch of folks who are really working hard to make that project come together and come together well, so that it's a great learning facility for our littlest members of our community in the Hillsborough and west of us in Washington County. So Jennifer, I listed names here, of course, Jennifer Vandeshear and Todd Hendrickson and Jordan Ely, and then a number of our contractors who've been working really hard. It is on schedule. Our goal for student programming is to start is later, is in the summer. We do plan to have our evaluation services, which obviously has touches with kids and families, and our administrative services for early learning move over earlier. So it's very exciting. It is will be beautiful, and a really good learning space for decades for children in our community. Um, I also am prognosticating, but I do believe that 2025 and beyond will be very exciting, very complicated, oftentimes work to improve and increase workforce development programming and career-related learning programming for students in our region. We've done a lot of legwork over the last couple of years to help facilitate conversations across district lines for how do we share resources, partner better with our community college partners and our workforce boards and our industry partners to get kids experiences that help them see what the possibilities for the world of work are and to get kids connected into careers that are meaningful, that are higher wage, without necessarily always thinking that four-year college is the only way to join the workforce in a positive way. So I'm really excited about that work. It has been county by county. We have our career-related learning team that's led by John Peplinski, folks like G. Bundy and Jamie Brady and others who are doing a lot of work to improve in that area in our region. I'm very excited about that work. The literacy and attendance work that we're doing is having starting to have some impact. We have, I believe now, every one of our districts, all 20 of our districts, are participating with us in our early literacy programming and improvement programming. That is really rare, you guys. Like, you go across the state. I don't believe there's very many places where every district in an ESD is participating, in a large ESD is participating in professional learning from a district like Beaverton with 40 plus thousand students to small districts as well. And we're really excited about that. And it's really because we have the best early literacy folks in the area work at Northwest Regional ESD. They are an incredibly powerful and smart group of folks. So really exciting. And our attendance work is also flourishing across the region, and we've seen some modest gains. So the results, you're always behind the eight ball when all the summative results come out from the year prior. Results are leaning upwards. Of course, there are still, I shouldn't say of course, there just are still pervasive gaps in our outcomes related to students who are historically marginalized or have historically not done well in public education systems. And that's our work. Our work is to close gaps here at the ESD. So really looking forward to the programming continuing. And then, of course, I talked about the legislative session. I do want to just mention a few things here without reading the report verbatim to the board. I did mention here that the governor's budget, and I talked about this in December, the governor's budget is proposed. It is out. We have dug into it and really tried to understand it. It is a massive document, and there are challenges for ESDs statewide right off the bat. A lot of funding for ESDs is found in an area of the budget called the grants and aid programming in the governor's budget, but it's grants and aid budget that will come basically out of ODE. And a lot of our large programs and small, actually, grant programs are in the grant and aid portion of the state budget. Right now, we're going to need the legislature to improve on what the governor's recommendation is there. This places in that grant and aids budget are things like EIECSE, Regional Inclusive Services. These are two large programs for us. The Student Success Act Technical Assistance Grant, which is basically how we do attendance and literacy services, right? Like these are the things I just bragged about are connected to some of these budget streams. And then a whole bunch of other stuff, like, for example, school safety and prevention, which is really our way of assisting districts with threat assessment and safety programming. And they rely on us heavily for that work that's in that budget. That's just an example. So what was a specific surprise, not very much is called out very specifically in the governor's budget. It's kind of like the grant and aids budget is talked about as a big blob. It's a lot of millions of dollars. But there was a specific call out for a reduction in the Student Success Act Technical Assistance Grant of $7.5 million. So I wrote about here in the report, that's about $1.25 million for our ESD And that reduction really was not on anybody's radar. I believe that it is, well, I'm fairly certain that it is connected to the economic forecast that came out that had a forecasted reduction in the collections on the cat tax, on the God, it's skipping my mind right now, the consumer uh, commercial activities tax, excuse me, Lord, the commercial activities tax. That projection went down, and that's where these funds come from. So the next economic forecast is in March. And what we're crossing our fingers for is that curve bends back the other way. That's the way that we'll really make a case for getting those restored. But that's going to be something that we're really going to have to keep our eye on. Um, Also, before, tonight you're going to hear a little bit more about legislative priorities for the region. We do a bunch of work with our superintendents to kind of set priorities, and those are in the board packet, and we'll talk more about that. Um, One thing we are going to do with our districts is talk about, and we're meeting with our superintendents on Friday, is to talk about this planned reduction in our instruction department, because these are services that are almost exclusively, I mean, almost like 99% outward facing and supportive of our school districts, not like for our own professional development in the ESD. And they have to have a say in what's most meaningful for them and what is untouchable, et cetera. And lastly, just on this piece, I wanted to let the board know that uh, since writing this report some point last week, we did receive notification from the state that we were awarded on the request, the RFA, the request for application on the early intervention, early childhood special education um, application that we sent to the state. Also, regional inclusive services are our two large state programs. Of course, we don't get a budget when they notify us. Um, the board had we had the board had approved us seeking to get those contracts renewed. And I just want to remind the board that that was a conversation that was difficult, I would say, and that is because there are so many difficult components, especially on EIECSE, regarding the funding levels, the actual procurement challenges that we've talked about as a group for some time now, and just the fact that we don't have a reserve. So when and we're not allowed to keep a reserve for a state contract. It is like you get a 2-year funding model and you're supposed to spend it down to the penny, or you send the money back. And that creates the conditions of what we're feeling right now in our program, which is a boom and bust cycle. We had 4 years ago an incredibly challenging time trying to hire for the 2-year cycle because we got a big boost in funding, and we did a ton of work to try to hire over 100. I can't remember the number anymore. Over 100 staff positions, and then only 2 years later to have that rug pulled out from under you into a reduction cycle, and that has continued now for two cycles. And so it's a going to be a really big decision for us as the administration when we come to the board and either ask you to uh, accept that contract program, or for us to basically tell the board that we might not be able to do this contract any longer. And I've said that to you last month. I said it to you in November as well. I'm trying not to surprise anybody here, but the liability in that program and the requirements, so we're talking about civil rights of young kids and families receiving services and then not being able to actually fulfill those because of the budget challenges, might be too much risk in this climate for the ESD to take on. So I wanted to make sure I put that back on the table again. So I'm being very clear. Um, I see Maureen's got has her hand up, Madam Chair. I'm happy to take some questions before I kind of finish out here.
Okay, Maureen? Thank you, Chair. Dan, it's about the technical assistance on SSA. Was it your understanding that it was across the board cuts and or was technical assistance targeted at a greater level? And we can all sit with our prayers and hopes for good news from the legislature, but obviously there are things that will not be fulfilled. And I mean, I just was curious about strategy on advocacy from districts, but just curious about how that shook out. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, I think it does. Yeah, I like I said, they're in the governor's budget, the grants and aid bucket. There was a recommendation for less funding in grants and aid. It's not very specific, and you can't. It's all lumped together. Um, so we have a lot of concerns because that's where EIECSE lives. That's where Regional Inclusive Services lives. And there's a call for a reduction in the grant and aids budget. While there is a call for an increase in the state school fund. And so for the calloused folks who have been around the block a little bit, like me, it seems to me like we're robbing, Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, where we're not actually adding money necessarily to the education enterprise. We're just moving the shells from here to there. That's very pessimistic. And I could be wrong, right? Because it's a budget proposal that doesn't have a ton of detail in it like you would expect in a budget like ours. The thing that was alarming is that within that structure, a big grants and aid budget and not a lot of detail, it was very specific about a reduction to the Student Success Act technical assistant grants for ESDs at $7.5 million. That was a very specific call out. And so it's real. I've done a ton of talking to people at the state, right? Trying to figure out, is it real? It is connected to the economic forecast. I think the strategy begins on Friday for us, which is me having conversation with superintendents about here's what these programs are. Here's your participation in them. Here's your strategic priorities. So we've done a lot to coordinate our district's students. Well, now it's called integrated guidance, but they're Student Success Act plans. And so we've been trying very hard for the last 5 years to align our services to their plans rather than just cook stuff up that we think is good. And so we're going to get a sense from the district leaders on what their priorities are. And if the priorities are going to be something like, hey, you guys can't cut X because we're really relying on you, first strategy is, well, you're going to have to help me fight for that because I can't do that by myself. Right. So I think we're just at the beginning. We're just at the beginning. And I won't, you guys can read my report. I'm very excited. We have two new leaders coming to the agency, and you can read about them there. And I'm happy and excited to get them in front of the board at some point soon. I did want to, and we are going to recognize you here in a sec, so I won't, steal all of Kelsey's thunder. But I feel so fortunate, I really do, to work with such an amazing group of people. You guys care about kids, you care about your communities. I know that you've all foregone the massive salaries you get for being on the ESD board. That was a joke and sarcasm for the listener. These are all volunteers who really care a lot and support kids in our communities. So I just wanted to thank you. You're a wonderful group of folks to work with and work for. So thanks for your service. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Madam Chair Tim Chuck.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other questions or comments to the superintendent? Okay, with that, we're going to move on to recognition and good news. And it's always so awkward when we're recognizing ourselves, but we'll hand it over to Kelsey.
Good evening. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Good evening. I I went away into the I don't know, somewhere on the internet in the moment that Becky was saying it's awkward to recognize ourselves. I don't know what else I missed, but thank you for bringing me on, Valerie. Good evening, Madam Timchuk, Madam Chair, and board members. It is true this month we are recognizing you instead of like we typically do in this time, other partners and outstanding staff around our organization. But this is a fun moment for us to take a pause and turn the camera background on you all and share our appreciation and gratitude for how much you mean to us. And I'm sure Dan will continue to go on with a lot of the gratitude he has. I know he's very grateful for this specific board. I just wanted to say that in my specific role in planning communications and various events like our in-service, some of the legislative visits that we've had recently, that this board is particularly engaged, insightful, and supportive to our team, and well connected as well. And through your time and the relationships you have each built in your respective distinguished careers and community roles, you've added tremendous value to our organization. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. It also is awkward and a challenge to show our sincere appreciation and gratitude in the virtual form in this 2D format. So hopefully my words don't fall too short or flat. We do have some mail love courtesy of our EIE CSE kiddos that we'll get to you all as a little bit further token of our appreciation. And again, thank you so much for all the volunteer work that you do. And Dan, thank you for clarifying any East Coast sarcasm that us West Coast folks can't understand.
Well, I'll just say on behalf of myself, it's always nice to be recognized and it's always nice to be thanked. And you folks do an excellent job of both. So that is anybody else have any comments to make? So just thank you so much, Kelsey, and we look forward to getting our gifts from the early intervention kids. And I think that is, that's the best thanks of all, because we do all do it because we care about our community and we care about the children in Oregon. So thank you. Okay, with that, we are now moving into public comment. And what I'd like to read, the Northwest Regional ESD Board of Directors appreciates community members sharing information during public comments. Members of the community wishing to address the board must complete a public comment request prior to the beginning of the board meeting. The board requests comments to be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers will state their name, home address for the record. While the board does not respond to public comment following the meeting, the chair, vice chair, and superintendent will together determine the appropriate level of response. Speakers may offer objective criticism of district operations or programs, but the board will not hear complaints concerning specific district personnel. And with that, Board Secretary, do we have any public comment this evening?
We do. Our first commenter is Annie Miller. I'm bringing them in now.
Annie?
Annie, if you're with us, please go ahead and unmute and show your video, please. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you. Welcome, Annie.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I will make it short and sweet. My name is Annie Miller. I live at 26760 Hammond Road in Rainier, Oregon. I am employed by the Rainier School District. I am a parent and a grandparent in the district as well. My concern is some things that have happened with the early childhood education program not being as responsive as they should in matters of ages 2.5 to 4. have specific examples, but I won't go there, that the client in question was not served in an appropriate and timely manner. And I'm very concerned that we have lots of money going into a big, beautiful building, and in order to do that, budgets were cut on early childhood, which I think has allowed several students to slip through the cracks in the early childhood program here in Rainier. And that is my concern. And I thank you for hearing me, and I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have another commenter. Give me one moment to bring them in. Robin Dumichel, and I apologize if I did not pronounce that correctly.
Robin?
Hello, I'm here. I apologize. I don't have camera to turn on. My name is Robin Dumichel. I am the president of the Rainier Education Association. My address is 28168 Old Rainier Road, Rainier, Oregon. My district is and has been a client of Northwest Regional ESD's fiscal services, including bookkeeping and payroll. Most certified staff in our district have been without an accurate pay stub for 4 months straight. 3 of my members lost insurance coverage for themselves and their children during these series of errors. I would just like to ask you to imagine the heartbreak when I have to have a conversation with a member about whether or not they should take their child to the doctor tomorrow because they can't afford the visit without insurance. Insurance their job entitles them to. Month after month, we are told that everything should be fixed next month. Only next month comes and we find a new type of error or sometimes repeated error. Northwest Regional ESD is not currently our bookkeeper, but when they were, our district overspent by $1.2 million. And for either of these situations, we just don't feel like we have a satisfactory explanation for why. We were given a general list of categories where overspend happened, but the confusion just wasn't resolved. So as a quick example, in a category of administrative pay was listed, but we didn't get any new administrators and they can't work overtime or extra duty hours, things like that. So we just don't understand how that category could be overspent. And 1.2 million is probably less than 0.5% of Northwest Regional ESD's more than $200 million budget, but it's more like 10% of the budget of a small rural school district like mine. This has impacted our ability to respond to challenges, and it cuts deep. The idea behind an ESD is a beautiful thing. Let's pool our resources to provide kids and the educators who care for them more services at a better cost. My district has put tens of thousands of dollars into the shared pot, but we don't feel we're receiving a full proper measure of services paid for. As a local union president, I meet monthly with other union presidents across this northwest corner of Oregon. And I know my district is not the only one with frustrations regarding the delivery of these services. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank you. All right. Any other public comment?
No, Board Chair, there are not.
All right. Thank you so much. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have items there on the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
A second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the consent agenda as reported. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, motion passes unanimously to accept the consent agenda. Next order of business are reports in our first report is the Oregon Response to Intervention and Instruction, ORTI, and an update by Ryan.
Good evening.
Evening, Ryan.
Nice to see you all. Happy New Year. Valerie, I'm just looking. Yes, I can share. Thank you. Just one moment. Can you see the slide decks okay, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, thank you. As a Director of Instructional Services, the Oregon Response to Instruction and Intervention Project is one of the teams I support. The big I is the instruction, the little I is intervention, and that's kind of a statement we make. It's not a typo on here. I think it's been a good fit. Both the project and I joined Northwest Regional the same year. The team was previously housed in Tigard Tualatin, where I was a longtime teacher, central office administrator, and building principal. So I have a little historical context, and I was a practitioner in RTI systems at those levels. And as some of you might know, the Oregon RTI project's about providing implementation support, technical assistance, and coaching in all aspects of RTI. We've been serving Oregon now for 20 years and worked with over 120 school districts in some capacity at some point. And at its core, this is an equity-centered project. An RTI process is kind of meant to ensure two big things: strong elementary reading programs, and then to help teams accurately navigate referrals and evaluations for students that may have a learning disability in the area of reading. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. How we support districts kind of varies by commitment and need. So districts opt into our project support. They aren't mandated to join, or ODE doesn't require it or anything. We provide statewide supports that are available to all Oregon districts, like our annual spring conference, virtual literacy symposium that just happened at the beginning of December. And we have a huge bank of resources on our website that I linked on that first slide that I'd encourage folks to look into. We have a 4-year implementation model for districts new to RTI, and a 1 to 2-year targeted support model for districts that were in the project previously, but they need help on a specific aspect of RTI. And we have some prescribed trainings and coaching commitments that they need to honor, that we honor for them in order for us to commit to supporting them. Because implementation and sustaining stuff like RTI takes a commitment. And we're currently in partnership with 29 school districts in either that 4-year or 1 to 2-year model. Those 29 districts and some other partners are represented here, and their names are in small font on the right-hand side. We have 5 Northwest Regional component districts who are currently working with us as well. And while over the 20 years, our work, our approach, our tools have evolved, our vision and mission haven't changed much. We have, and we still work to ensure that every child in every Oregon district will receive the instruction and support they need and deserve to become a reader. And we work to develop capacity in each district community so they can build systems that'll do just that. Currently, our work is adapting to the lens of the Oregon Early Literacy Framework, and that was adopted in 2023. It's driving a lot of important initiatives, conversations in our state. I meet monthly with the Director of Literacy at ODE, sit on a couple of statewide literacy teams to ensure alignment with our project and what the state expects from districts. That's always been calibration over the years, trying to kind of figure out how to partner the right way with state expectations. But like I mentioned, the other big work we do is ensuring strong reading programs as part of an equitable, accurate special education eval process. And that's when a district suspects a student may have a learning disability. And the eval process begins with a referral, which prompts school teams then to gather information and potentially evaluate and make decisions about whether or not a child has a disability, which is a high stakes and obviously very big decision. And in Oregon, here's where we come in. In Oregon, if a team suspects a student has a specific learning disability, there are 2 state-approved ways to investigate that. One is patterns of strengths and weaknesses, and one is response to intervention. And the state funds us to promote, train, support, and do all the things I already talked about with RTI. And this usually means that we're helping them de-implement a patterns of strengths and weaknesses model, which is a huge system shift. And a lot of this kind of project energy is put into, okay, we need to stop doing what we don't think works and start this new system commitment. And if you're like me, you might be wondering, why does the state allow both methods if they're adamant that one is the better process? It's a great question. I wonder it all the time. We talk about it all the time, how we might all get on the same bus on this. But what we know is the effect size for RTI is much higher in changing student outcomes, coming up with the right student plans. According to John Hattie's meta-analysis, the patterns of strengths and weakness model, which I'll talk a little bit here in a sec, shows no evidence that it can identify better programs for a student and inform a well-developed individual education plan. So patterns of strength and weakness in Oregon, a PSW model requires that if you have an achievement, well, if you test a student who has low achievement on a cognitive assessment and their intelligence is significantly higher than a team has can determine that they have a specific learning disability based on that gap, how they're achieving and what their cognitive ability is. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but that's the gist. It doesn't take into account that kids struggle in reading for a whole bunch of reasons, including poor instruction, the opportunity to learn, lack of good assessments that are informing teachers on what needs to be taught and retaught, because just because you're not achieving, obviously does not mean you're disabled. And so there are some missteps that can happen when teams lean on a patterns of strengths and weakness model. RTI, on the other hand, works to ensure all kids are getting that strong literacy instruction across all grades in their core. It requires screening of all students with evidence and curriculum aligned tools. So teachers can identify those things that need to be taught and retaught, and then which students need intervention. The idea being, if a student isn't achieving, you intensify the support, which is pretty commonsensical. And in an RTI system, a team of educators are meeting consistently, they're thinking together, they're learning about best practice, reviewing outcomes, and ensuring that things are being done with fidelity. And they're getting to know student profiles at a deeper level. So then they're prepared to make an informed decision about whether or not to move forward with an evaluation, whether or not a student has a disability, and what should be part of an individualized plan if it comes to that. And if the triangle I just showed is what'll pop up if you Google RTI, but this is the graphic we prefer. It details what happens in the tiers of support in the system, and it has these foundational aspects that have to exist for RTI to work the right way: inclusive, equitable culture, an infrastructure and capacity that's going to help these things go, and then community family partnerships and communication, so families understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're adjusting instruction based on what the students are showing you they need. And as I noted with the Hattie research, RTI has good outcomes for kids. There are studies worldwide that detail that. But this one was actually just published this year out of UC Irvine about our project specifically. The team there used state-provided data, and I've since met with them, and we're thinking about how they can help with some other research to expand. But what they found, based on data from 2008 through 22, I believe, that RTI reduces special ed identification. It increases the reading score of Black students and all students. And the research that we're working on with them now is seeing if systems that implement RTI with fidelity actually retain teachers at a higher rate, because they and we kind of hypothesize when a teacher understands the process of helping their kids, that they feel more supported, they know what's next, they understand how they need to adjust, and they have people around them who can help. So anecdotally, we see that happening, and these researchers are going to help us with that, which is cool. And the regional work we're doing now this year, we targeted this, we piloted this targeted support model based on the fact that so many districts that had worked with us before need help. They got a lot of new people in place. It's been a while since they were working with us. They need to kind of dial it back in. Four of those districts are in our region: Gaston, GTSD, Vernonia, Astoria. Banks is a member of that 4-year cadre model. They're in year 2. And as Dan mentioned, we have some outstanding early literacy people, and this RTI group works right alongside them in literacy land over by the IT department, probably driving Stuart and his team crazy with all the talking and hashing things out they do. But we've really been able to offer some great things for the region with all that knowledge and all the resources that the RTI project and our early literacy team bring to the table. And again, one of the statewide supports we provide is as our annual conference. Huge conference, really well attended. We usually have to shut down registration sometime early in the new year. But if any of you are interested in attending, I know a guy that can get you in. And we really, over the years, have offered some outstanding sessions around all things literacy, all things MTSS and database decision making, and excited about this year's offering as well. So that was quite a lot, but happy obviously to take any questions or talk through anything you'd like.
Board members have any questions? Maureen.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you. That was great. So just a quick question. Of course, I'm a little curious and interested about the targeted work. And as you first started to describe it, I was thinking it was a particular component of the system. But then as you talked about it further, my sense was really the whole system in the district needed to be kind of realigned or reset, whether that's turnover or just stepping back from it. So I just wanted to if you pick a district, or really it is just a kind of a systems refresh, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Just interested
absolutely.
in that work.
Yeah, so each spring we open up. When we start our 4-year cadre, that's kind of a scope and sequence that's set for the 4 years. And we kind of have year 1, tier 1 work, year 2, tier 2, and so on. These targeted support districts can apply each spring. We review and see kind of where they're at, what they need. That level of commitment is really important because you might get a couple of school principals who want to work on something locally, but a system has to commit. We need leadership at the higher levels to kind of be able to support it. And then they'll meet with one of our coaches and identify, okay, so where do you hypothesize the need is in RTI? But to your point, a lot of them think it's kind of all over the place. But what we're finding more is that they really need kind of the foundations and to step back and say, like, what are our standards of practice in literacy? How are we going to build our schedule so we can do this the right way? How are we going to train our teachers? And that's kind of been, I think, the theme of these targeted supports. But there's exceptions to that. We're kind of working with different folks in different ways. Tigert in particular, who's kind of unique.
Well, appreciate that. Thank you, Ryan, for the follow-up.
Sure.
Superintendent. No. Oh,
Sorry, Ernest raised his hand, and I'll lower mine for later.
okay. Ernest.
Hi there. Thank you. Ryan, this is amazing. Thank you very much. I'm not sure the slide number, but it's the slide starting with specific learning disabilities. It's the first slide that starts it. You have an image that shows a normal distribution and reading outcomes. And it starts at that, in my world, we call that the second sigma, but it starts at that kind of -1. Is there a reason why it starts at -1 to your knowledge?
This particular graphic, no. I think it's just to illustrate, and actually Superintendent Goldman with his school psych background might be able to comment on this too. But typically in my experience, a lot of times with the patterns and strengths and weakness approach, if a student is 2 standard deviations below in achievement from their cognitive scores, then that will be a decision point for teams around this student is demonstrating characteristics of having a specific learning disability. So that graphic wasn't intentionally colored like that, but rather pulled from a PSW article from, I can't remember which publication, but.
Gotcha. And my follow-up, if you don't mind me asking, Um, um, are there any cracks just before that deviation? Like, are there any kids, or can you help me to understand the potential for kids to fall through the cracks? You know, just before that line.
Well, with this model, which we don't endorse at all, I think
Uh,
kids often are over-identified, misidentified. Teams don't understand their profile to the level they need to make an accurate decision about whether or not they have a brain and language and or language-based disability. They have low achievement, they have higher IQ, but that doesn't tell the whole story of a
I
student.
didn't tell the story. Right.
Yeah, which is why the RTI process is the better process, in my opinion, and in the state's opinion, who funds our project. But this is something we navigate a lot because in order to do RTI the right way, like I just uh, mentioned with Maureen, it's you have to have a system that's willing to stop doing some things and start doing some other things, and that takes a lot of work, especially in today's context.
Well, I can appreciate your work. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Ryan, do you mind if I just pop in there for a sec?
Go ahead.
So first of all, I can't believe it's 20 years for the project because I was there and
Yeah.
it makes me feel really old. So that's pretty amazing. The tails on the normal curve, the idea there, by the way, the negatives is that really when you think about student populations or any population, the idea is that the tails just keep going because it kind of goes into an infinity. Like that it doesn't stop. There's not like in this case, the worst achieving student in the world is not like a real person, right? It's kind of keeps on going the into the everywhere. Um, that's one. The other thing that Ryan just said there around where do kids fall through the cracks on that model? And the answer is everywhere. So, as Ryan said, I was a school psychologist and I worked in Portland schools, and it was a patterns and strengths and weakness process. And that's how I was trained. I was trained to do that model. And it wasn't until I went over to Tiger Tualatin, where there was this pretty amazing leader. Her name is Patria Hagen Gilden. And the first time she met me, asked me, what good is an IQ test? And she like cornered me and made me feel really crazy and dumb. And shocked my brain about the notion here that what I was doing was fairly malpractice based. And the reason why it happens, this isn't to make people feel bad who don't use RTI. There's a reason why this happens. It is, first of all, is a very entrenched system. A lot of what we do in education came out of a period of time of extreme research in the early 50s, 40s, and 50s around cognitive assessment. And um, and so systems for decades and decades and decades have been doing this, and it's very hard to change. The reason it's hard to change is it's really easy. Like if a kid's struggling in Ernest Stevens' classroom, you refer that kid to somebody else. That somebody else was a school psych like me or a team, that says, hey, well, we don't know why. You've tried all these things. And so you get a test. And the test is, as Ryan just said, it's a subtraction problem. I give you an IQ test, I give you an academic test, I subtract. If the gap is big enough, you qualify. If the gap's not big enough, guess what? You don't qualify and you're still struggling. And that's why is the systems change. Like the entire system from the curriculum instruction in the classroom to the support folks and the interventions, et cetera, has to be a coordinated system. It is a monster lift for a school system. And it is, in my mind, it's the most important lift a school system can make. And one of the things I'm very proud of, the board should know, and this is under Ryan's leadership here at the ESD, so thank you, Ryan, in advance, is it used to be that you either got into the 4-year program, support program, or you didn't. You were like in or you weren't. And so, for instance, when I went from Tiger to Hood River, the Hood River already been in the project, but guess what? I couldn't see any evidence of a strong RTI system. and I was in charge of a lot of that stuff in Tigard. So I kind of knew what I was looking for. And the project couldn't help me. Now in Ryan's leadership, a district like Hood River, I saw them on the map actually. They can get support from the project. It's not as 4-year intensive, but it's targeted and you can reboot and reboot and reboot. And that's an amazing thing for our state. Even Tiger Tualatin is getting a little bit of help from us now, which was like the opposite, right? Because you need to build these systems and it takes time. So I just really appreciate that move from Ryan and the squad, and ODE's, permissiveness around allowing us to do that kind of work. It's very meaningful.
So there aren't any other questions. I had a question. One is, will the governor's focus on early literacy be something that this program gets to benefit from?
I think so. However, we are funded out of the special education department at ODE as a mechanism to disrupt these disproportionate identification rates. And you can't do that without prevention, which is why literacy is such a huge part of what we do. And I don't see why we can't all work together on these system changes and learn together. This team of coaches I have are just really smart and have so much to offer, and the bank of tools and templates and things that we've created that live on that website can benefit so many folks. So I'm hoping we're not duplicating efforts, which is part of why I'm intentionally getting with our ODE literacy team, and our chief academic officer, Logan, has hooked me up with an ESD state literacy team. And so we're moving in the right direction, but we just got to make sure everybody understands what's already out there before we start creating new stuff.
Very good. That's a good answer, because I find a lot of times the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing in this state. So that's a good answer. So, all right. Thank you so much for being here this evening and presenting that good information.
You got it. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Our next report is on early learning evaluation team spotlight. Karen.
Oh, Karen, you're muted.
Yeah. It happens like once a day, even though we've been doing this forever. So anyway, good evening, Board of Directors. My name's Karen Dalby, and I'm coordinator here with EIECSC. One of my responsibilities is to manage and support the department's evaluation team. And I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight some of the activities our team's been engaged in during the last 2 years to develop additional knowledge and the tools to ensure that our evaluations are culturally responsive and that they honor the cultural identities of the families we serve. Next slide, please. The EIECS evaluation team consists of a talented and hardworking team of evaluators, our intake specialists, and an amazing interpreter. Our team completes early intervention, and that's for children from birth to 3, and early childhood special education evaluations, and those are for children ages 3 to 5, for families in all 4 counties that we serve. These evaluations determine if a child qualifies for services and support through our program, and they're based on the federal and state criteria. We receive referrals for evaluations from a wide variety of sources, including, most importantly, our families, pediatricians, child care centers, Head Start, DHS, and other agencies. With all of those referrals, we stay pretty busy. Our team typically completes about 2,500 evaluations a year. Next slide, please. So we have been focusing on developing and refining our skills in this area for several years. And during the last 2 years in particular, it's been our focus as strategy 4.2 on our action plan. Before I talk about the work that the team has been engaged in, I think it's important to talk a little bit about why we're investing so much time and energy into this work. So culturally responsive evaluations really help to shape equitable and effective early childhood education. These evaluations play a critical role in accurately identifying the needs of our students by considering their cultural and linguistic differences. This approach not only reduces the likelihood of misidentification, but also ensures that every child is assessed with fairness and respect for their unique backgrounds. For example, children from bilingual households often exhibit language acquisition patterns that differ from their monolingual peers. Through culturally responsive evaluations, we can better differentiate between language differences and potential language disorders, focusing on a child's strengths and abilities rather than on their perceived deficits. Additionally, by engaging families as active partners in this process, we build trust and ensure that our evaluations are meaningful and respectful of diverse perspectives. By doing so, we align our evaluations with the values and expectations of the communities that we serve. And I think it's important to point out, and Ryan mentioned this earlier during his presentation, that historically, certain ethnic and cultural groups have faced disproportionate identification as having disabilities. Culturally responsive methods are a step towards addressing these disparities by using tools and practices that are inclusive and representative of our diverse student population. The bottom line is it's important that the evaluation team continues to grow in these practices in order to provide every child with an opportunity to thrive academically, emotionally, socially, and physically, and to be kindergarten ready. In my last role, I was a special ed director over at Sherwood School District, and I really saw that first day of kindergarten when I would walk in and help with students, I really saw the difference of kids who had received intervention services and supports and those who had not. And so this work is really important, and it's important to make sure that we align with our communities. Next slide, please. So that's why we're engaging in the work. Now I'll talk a little bit about the work that we've completed. First, we'll talk about the work we did last year. In this area, staff professional development is key. Last year, in addition to training evaluators to better recognize and mitigate their own biases, another area of focus was on continued professional development related to conducting culturally accurate evaluations of young children. For example, one of our trainers was Lillian Duran, who is a professor from University of Oregon and is an expert in this area. Her professional development in particular really helped us to create and then pilot an evaluation rubric that serves as a guideline and common tool across staff to improve our evaluation process. The rubric rates key practices such as incorporating strength-based input from families, including their perspectives on the child's development, considering the child's exposure to different languages, traditions, and experiences, documenting the use of bilingual evaluators or interpreters as necessary, and describing the assessment tools used and the potential limitations of those tools based on the child's cultural and linguistic background. Next slide, please. So last year, we developed the rubric, we piloted it, and then made quite a few modifications because the more we used it, the more we learned about it, and the more we wanted to improve it. This year, we continued with this work. We have created look-fors and have calibrated the rubric criteria. But most importantly, we've been using the rubric to evaluate our progress. Our goal on the action plan is to include 90% of the elements from the rubric in at least 80% of the evaluation reports. And so during the first quarter, we were at 67%. And in preparation for this presentation, I looked at our data yesterday and we were up to 77%. So we're making good progress on this goal and we'll keep on pushing. In addition to the rubric, other activities we're engaging in this year include the creation of a family survey. Our goal is to gather feedback from families about their perspective of the evaluation process in order to understand how we might better meet their needs. We have a large team who've been working on this project, and now we have a draft. Final questions are ready. And next, we're hoping to have a culturally diverse focus group give us feedback on our draft questions before we finalize it and begin using it. I want to thank Kim Smith, who is an occupational therapist on the evaluation team, for taking the lead on this project. And then team members, Hal, B, Kim, Aleda, Tiffany, McKenna, Jenny, Candace, and Lindsay, thank you for your work in this area. I'm sorry, I just felt a little bit like I was on the Golden Globes and trying to thank everyone quickly. But there were a lot of people, and if I missed anyone, I'm sorry. There are a lot of people that have really done some great work. In addition to ongoing PD, and we work in this area every month, we're working to ensure that our whole evaluation process from the intake, so that's when families first contact us or we contact families, to the evaluation meeting is a family-friendly experience. The intake team and evaluators are in the process of looking at the system as a whole and determining how we can reduce redundancies and be overall more culturally sensitive. And then in the time I have left, in addition to the activities in the action plan, we've been engaged in improving our communication tools for non-English speaking families. Jenny Jones, who is an SLP, with the help of our amazing interpreter translator, Aleda Rivas, have been focusing on the translation of our evaluation report summaries into Spanish. Additionally, Jenna Stewart, and she's also a speech language pathologist on our team, she created a visual evaluation and service summary form that provides the most pertinent information from the evaluation to families in both English and Spanish. And I'm most excited that she's now working on figuring out how to provide this in other languages too. This is important because our evaluation reports are often, 10 to 15 pages long, and they can have a lot of technical information. And this visual tool really makes information much more easily accessible for families and physicians and people who need to know this information in order to support kids. And finally, we have a team creating a multilingual toolkit that will provide a visual and multilingual roadmap to explain the complicated special education process for all of our families. And so I want to thank Lindsay, Candace, Sarah, and Kong for this work. It's really appreciated. So that is a brief overview of the work we are doing in this area. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great. Thank you so much for your presentation. And board members, do you have any questions?
just want to say that thank you for the information, Karen. It was really it's nice to hear being in the school setting. We're seeing such a high influx of Spanish, well, in my district, Spanish speaking families, and so just really the thought that's going into um, translating the information, but also providing visuals. I think a lot of the times we use a lot of the words that's very, technical, and we know what that means. But when it's going out to families, that it's in a way that in a format that they also understand, and really provides, level of engagement. So thank you so much for the information. It's really nice to hear that we have, something like this going on, just the thought that goes behind it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And this is an area that we will continue to work on. It's important that we are here for a service for families, and that we're a service for our school districts, and that the information we're providing is helpful, because ultimately we're here to serve kids and to have them be the best they could be.
Well, thank you so much, and please thank your team for all the great work and keep it up. So thank you for letting us know.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have regional legislative priorities. We get to hear from Kelsey again.
Good evening once again, board members. I am back talking about our legislative priorities for the upcoming session. Most of what I'll share today is things that have come up in our superintendent's past board report or reports to the board, or through conversations we've had. So they'll be familiar struggles, challenges, and priorities. I'm first going to take us through the regional superintendent priorities, so priorities that we put together with the superintendents in our region, so we can make sure that when we are in state level conversations, we're accurately representing them. And then I'll also go through a couple of our programs and specific legislative priorities related to Northwest Regional ESD operated programs that we are proposing for you all to adopt. With that, if you could advance the slide. A lot of the priorities that are put before you today are also priorities that some of the other big districts boards have adopted. They're also might look familiar because they're coming out of other statewide organizations. It's common messaging across multiple advocacy groups. Specifically around Governor Kotek's recommendations for modifying how current service level is calculated to more accurately account for some of the escalating costs that school districts face. Along with that, opposing unfunded mandates, suspending future unfunded mandates, and looking at some of the current ones that districts are faced with, such as unemployment insurance. That's the first section of what the regional superintendents put forth as priorities. I've got 2 more slides for regional superintendents priorities. So next slide, please. Then special education is a big theme for this legislative session and a lot of education advocates. So superintendents prioritized the following 3 in relation to special education. When special education is underfunded, then it tends to erode the general fund resources as well and overburden our workforce and put student safety at risk. And so we made sure that messaging was in there. But the specific asks are around changing the state school fund formula so that the special education cap is 15%. It is now 11%. And since submitting this, I think the number has changed slightly, that'd be a 400 million increase to the state school fund. The next one is around 100% reimbursement for high cost disability, would be a $150 to $170 million increase to the state school fund. And then also definitely not new to you all. The superintendents are also wanting to prioritize fully funding EIE, CSE, and regional inclusive services. We have a couple outspoken superintendents who have shared how when we are sending kids into kindergarten less prepared because they did not have access to as much service early on in life, or if they're getting less service in their district for school age folks through regional inclusive services, it is a draw from some important resources in their system. So we are also putting that forward as a priority in this section. Okay, next section. This was language we were still workshopping when the superintendents last met. These were priorities that we reviewed at the local service plan retreat that happens with superintendents in the fall in November. And so there was conversation around if we're going to expand CTE and career connected learning, what should that look like? It was clearly a passion of our superintendents to do this, and it was clear that strengthening workforce partnerships would be a way to get that done. And so this is high level vision language that was reflective of the conversation we had with superintendents, though this specific language hasn't been before them yet. So that's the reason for the yellow pending superintendent approval. But this is reflective of the conversation that they had in November. That's what the regional superintendent's priorities are. And I will, Valerie, if you could just move us to the slides, I'll keep presenting on everything because there is a fair amount of overlap and just take questions at the end. So Northwest Regional ESD program specific priorities and you know, Superintendent Goldman did mention it during his board report. There, of course, ends up being a level of defense or nimbleness that does happen as things shape in the legislative session. And so Student Success Act is in here and hopefully we'll see what else comes up that is new to us, but these are the ones that are currently on our radar that have the biggest impact on our sorry, the Student Success Act Technical Assistance Grant. This is Student Success Act here is the for EIE CSE, but these are the EIE CSE priorities that we've put together in partnership with a number of other advocacy partners, including Children's Institute, OAESD, and other ESDs, other contractors that run EIE CSE. So fully funding this program would be a $432.8 million ask. In addition, the Student Success Act was an infusion of new resources a few years ago, and so that has slowly eroded over time and supplemented general fund dollars, and so making sure those are both there. Modernizing the EIE CSE funding model, which was a big topic of conversation at your last board meeting around having a more proactive funding model instead of a reimbursement model, and then aligning the EIE CSE funding calculations to the CSL relevant CSL reforms that we discussed on the regional superintendent priorities slides. Finally, regional inclusive services has a $122 million ask to be fully funded. They have a they had done a study actually last year, I think, on what it would mean to fully fund the program. So that's where this number comes from. And then also this is another common message among a number of school districts and other advocacy partners that the specialized programs like this one have severe workforce shortages. And so prioritizing programs to remove barriers for licensure, invest in scholarships, invest in pathway programs that will help these programs have a strong pool of staffing. Those are the legislative priorities that we are putting before the board for you all to consider for adoption. I have also put up here some key events to get on your calendars, opportunities to join shoulder to shoulder with our families and our staff and our partners to advocate for our programs and special education services. We have a few different opportunities based on where people are coming from and what they're able to access. So an in-person workshop in Hillsborough, a virtual workshop, and a legislative visit to the Capitol at the end of February. Also, we'll see some of you this Thursday at OSBA's legislative summit as well in Washington County. And one more slide, I think, and then I can take questions. So on our website, we are going to be putting together materials and resources for folks who want to advocate for our programs. Right now, we have the EIECSE about EIECSE one-pager that we've been using in legislative visits. We have general information about Northwest Regional, and we'll work on getting these priorities up there as well with the board's approval. And I'll make sure that they're available in hand on Thursday for those that join us at the OSBA Legislative Summit. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that information. Does the board have any questions? All right. Well, thank you for,
Oh,
Maureen?
there are questions.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, that was kind of me not finding my hand. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And I guess my only comment or just on those opportunities as there's a need or a fit for a particular, board member to advocate or, I'm happy to participate as needed, where needed, but just maybe a little bit of, instead of kind of you all are welcome if there's a particular need in one of them, let me know and happy to help in any of those capacities. So,
okay, noted. Thank you. We appreciate it. We have been very thankful for the board's proactiveness and showing up and helping be a voice for our programs when speaking with lawmakers. It has, I know there's been a lot of time and effort put into that this year. And so all of these priorities, I sped through them, but they were a lot of work to get to this point for us to kind of narrow in on what some of the key priorities should be and what the big overlap is with some of our other partners that we are aligning with.
Well, and Kelsey, I guess the only thing that I would add, and Chair might expand on this too. I mean, I feel that the ESD, all the ESDs, it's a delicate dance to support our partners and the broad funding, but be clear and advocate for our needs. Because as we all know, the pot is not overflowing. And I just appreciate the work to try to stay aligned and be good partners, but also fight for what we need to do for the children that we serve. And it's tricky. So I just appreciate everything that you and Dan and the team are doing to try to, do that dance. So thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Maureen, for that. That's kind of what I wanted to mention. I think it's like, if you were a legislator, your day would be filled with people asking you for hundreds of millions of dollars. And one meeting to the next, you can go from education and all the nuances that you guys have to listen to from us, right? I mean, if you're not a public educator for 20 plus years, it can get pretty acronym and heavy and, there's lots of components. But like, just imagine you talk to somebody like me and you're a legislator, and then there's somebody from transportation sectors right out the door, human services, homeless services, it just goes on, right? Business services, the whole thing. So we have to get very tight about how we talk about things with our legislative folks and also amongst ourselves. And so I'm very happy that at least in across the state, in terms of the superintendent group, there is a strong conviction around the governor's work that the governor ordered around the current service level calculation. It's very positive for K-12 education. because we really have never had a more accurate, true accounting of what it just means to roll up the next year. That's significant and brave work because it's never happened for a reason because it costs money. And so there's a lot of appreciation for that. And we need to convey that when we talk to legislators because it's not a done deal, right? Like the legislators have to agree to that. And so that affects our partners, as Maureen was just saying, more than it affects the ESD directly, to be honest, right? Because that is our school district's funding. It's very important, obviously. The other thing is all this other stuff that we're talking about with all the acronyms, RIS, Regional Inclusive Services, EIECSC, SSATA, like all this stuff. It is the vast majority of it. It's special education. It's services to kids who need the most in the system, who struggle the most in our communities. And that's the real ask, right? It is thank you for current service level. And the investment that we need in the state is for the kids and families who are furthest from opportunity in our education system. And that's our students with disabilities. Those two things, all the details we can get to, right? Because they're not going to listen to that anyway. So just as you guys start having conversations, as the session heats up, a lot of you have a lot of opportunities. Some of you, this isn't your jam and you bring other skill sets to your board work, right? And that's great. But it's really these two big components that I just want to leave our board thinking about. So with that, I'll rest.
Well, I've got enough jam for most of you, so we will we're going to continue to take this and for those of us that'll be joining us tomorrow night when we're talking directly to legislators so that they understand, and it is I'm so glad we brought this up, that we serve all of these school districts, and tomorrow night's focus is just Washington County, and we serve much more than Washington County, but just keep taking bits by bits, and so that they know who we are and what we care about, and so we can take on the K-12, but also take on the ESD funding. So thank you, Kelsey, for that report, and I'm sure we will get some updates as the legislative session goes on.
So Chair, I'm going to jump in for a second just because I have to give you, this is Board Appreciation Month, a shout out. I don't know if you all know what a fierce champion you have as a board chair. And Becky works tirelessly, she is phenomenal across the state, fighting, advocating for the children that we serve. And she's amazing. And I know you guys know that, but she more than deserves just a moment of just saying she's our champion and she's doing an amazing job. So thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Maureen. That's very, very nice. Thank you. Like I said, I've got enough jam to cover all this. You guys have to pull me back. So, so with that, we're moving on to first readings of proposed policies. And Debbie, you want to join us for?
Good evening, board. I say this every time. I think I need to talk to Valerie and Dan about my place on the agenda, because I come in after just the very best things. And I do, before I start on the policy tonight, I do want to also thank the board. I was just reviewing the agenda and the amount of information you've had in the last 90 minutes, let alone the things that come at you. You not only pay attention to it, you understand it. And to be able to understand it and then spend, again, your highly paid board time advocating for not just the ESD, but the students and families that we serve is nothing short of remarkable. And there are not very many boards like you. And so thank you very much. Before you tonight, I bring you two draft policies for first reading. The first one is the evaluation of administrator summary. In looking through our OSBA update, we do not have a current administrator evaluation policy. That being said, I do want to assure the board that administrators are evaluated and evaluated according to the state standards. And so the fact we don't have a policy, it is an optional policy. However, our recommendation is that the board consider adding that into the section C of the board policies. You can see in the draft that the previous standards are written into the policy. And the reason those are struck is that the standards for administrative and educational leadership change on occasion. And by not identifying the specific standards in the policy, it means the board will not have to see this policy come back as frequently as it has seen some of the others that come before you. On the fingerprinting and background check policy, there have been some changes in the fingerprinting process in that it used to be that districts would have the little stamp pads and staff would come and you could do fingerprints on site. You could send them to the sheriff's office to get them done. However, in recent years, we use a third-party provider field print, and there's numerous locations. We can have someone obtain fingerprints in 24 hours if they can get an appointment at any field print office in the state. This policy updates that and does talk about that people can begin work on a conditional basis pending the return of fingerprints, which is our practice. That being said, given some of the news in the region, that also is a concern. Like, how do we know that we are putting people in front of kids and we know what their background is? We run before anyone steps in front of students. So this is for student-facing employees. It would be for our interns. It would be for anyone who's going to interact with students. We run a background check and they are not permitted to begin until that background check is returned. And so we actually double down at the ESD on checking background, not only a background check, but also the fingerprint process. So this is an update to the fingerprint and criminal records check policy. And I am available to answer questions. I don't know what else to say to that.
Can I add one thing, Madam Chair, before the board discusses, please?
Yes.
Just to call attention, this is about our employees, and as Debbie said, the process for background checks for student-facing folks. This does not apply to contractors who do not interface with kids. So in other words, our software companies, and we have a ton of contracts, right? With Zoom, we have a contract, right? We don't run background checks on services where people don't have contact with children or staff directly. So just want to clarify for the board.
Thank you, Dan. We do on our contractors. I will also clarify the contractors that we do contract with that are in front of students. Not only is the contracting agency required to provide their background, but we require them to go through steps to do our background check and others before they're ever allowed to be in front of kids. The priority on this policy is for student-facing individuals.
Great. So any questions about either one of these proposed policies? The only thing I'll add is the one about the administrative. I think that that's just good board governance for our public to know that even though you have been doing it, and of course you've been doing it, that we just recognize it as a standard in our bylaws of that it is something that is a process for us. So I appreciate that being added. All right, we'll look forward to the final reading in the consent calendar. Our last report is administrative reports. Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a holiday break here of about almost 2.5 weeks, and it hadn't been so long since we had a board meeting in December. So we have 2 administrative reports, actually 3 administrative reports. I'm happy to answer any questions. It has not been the busiest of months yet professionally for folks. So it's a little bit leaner than you're used to, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
And just in case people did notice that, that's why we don't have a finance report, just simply because from our last board meeting and then being done, that's why there just was not a finance report. But it's not that finances didn't keep going through, just not a full report. Any questions about the administrative report? All right, with that, we'll move on to action items. And our first one is adopting Resolution 25-003, Black History Month in Lyra. There you go. There you are. Take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair Timchuk and members of the board. Today I bring to you our resolution related to celebrating Black History Month. And so you have the document and cover sheet there in front of you. I'll read the resolution. We acknowledge and honor the invaluable contributions of Black and African Americans to the labor force of this nation. From the forced labor that built much of the country's infrastructure during the era of slavery, through the current area of forced labor of incarcerated people, who are often people of color, to the pivotal roles played by Black workers in every industry, including agriculture and manufacturing and healthcare and education, the labor and ingenuity of Black Americans have been integral to the progress and prosperity of the United States. Despite enduring systemic oppression, inequities, and exploitation, their resilience and innovation have shaped the economic and cultural foundation of our society. This acknowledgement calls us to reflect on our collective responsibility to address labor injustices and ensure equity and dignity for all our workers in the present and future. Northwest Regional Education Service District Board recognizes the moral imperative to not only honor these contributions, but to also confront and dismantle the ongoing injustices and inequities faced by Black and African Americans. It is essential to acknowledge the roles that we play in perpetuating these challenges and commit to taking actionable steps toward achieving equity and justice. And whereas this board is committed to ensuring equitable access to opportunities for Black and African American students, staff, and families, advancing racial equity within our schools and programs, and fostering an inclusive environment where all can thrive, now therefore be it resolved by the members of the Northwest Regional Education Service District Board of Directors, 4 areas: recognition, commitment, observance, and accountability. We officially recognize February 2025 as Black History Month and call upon every individual to reflect on and celebrate the enduring legacies and accomplishments of Black and African Americans. Our commitment, we call upon each of us to listen actively to the voices of Black and African Americans, to deepen our understanding of their experiences, both historical and contemporary, and to make meaningful action to confront and eliminate biases, racism, and inequities in our communities, cultures, and institutions. We encourage active participation in Black History Month through appropriate activities, programs, ceremonies, initiatives that promote learning, dialogue, and actionable reforms. Accountability, the board pledges to continue identifying and implementing policies and practices that advance equity, inclusion, and justice for Black and African American students, staff, and families.
Thank you so much. It's always so well thought out. Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board?
Chair, I have a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Lawaru and the team for putting this together. I just got back from North Carolina, and I mean, like, I can still feel it, as I read it on the paper. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
Chair, I move.
It's been moved. Seconded. It's been properly moved and seconded that the board adopt Resolution 25-003 in honor of Black History Month. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
You're welcome. And the resources, as usual, are on the final page. And so as we celebrate the month, we could utilize those resources to advance what we know, do things ongoing for educators out there, for those with young people in their lives. There are many resources related to books. And so I would encourage you, if you haven't bought a book related to Black people, Black history, Black culture, I get mine from Third Eye Books, but They're a Black-owned bookstore. We have probably a list of 250 different books through the resources on that page. So check that out. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right, our next order of business is Resolution 25-004, protections for students at schools regardless of immigration status. Superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. God, I wish I had a sultry, smooth voice like Luaru when I'm reading resolutions. I actually, this is quite a long resolution. It's very dense. I'm happy to read it, Madam Chair. My plan was not to read the entire resolution. I do want to point out, if it's so pleases, a few highlights, and then, of course, focus on what we're asking the board to demand of me and the administration here at the ESD. Would that be okay?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So first, I just want to point out what might be obvious to folks, but there's a lot of rhetoric right now around deportation, immigration status, etc. And it makes families nervous. It makes families of all kinds of other backgrounds nervous, and that spills over into schools very quickly. And I know part of a large part of what drives us at the ESD is the notion that every student belongs in our schools, and every student can and will be successful when the educators in those schools and everybody around those educators believes in them, cares about them, supports them, etc. So we feel that it's necessary to send that message to families that their kids can be in our schools to the greatest degree. We can't overpromise anything. There's, laws, etc., but we can set some procedures in place to create the safest environments we can. So a lot of the beginning of this resolution references existing policy from the board. It references our adopted vision from the board, and it references many of our key, what we call collective commitments that we work off in terms of our strategic plan. And so this is not coming out of nowhere. The board has already made many proclamations and rules around ensuring that kids from all backgrounds, including kids with different immigration statuses or nationalities, or family histories and ethnicities, races, can thrive in our school systems. So that's the beginning here. The therefores I will read those. So now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors directs the superintendent and all employees of the Northwest Regional ESD to require an authorized warrant from Immigration and Naturalization Services, INS, or Immigration Control Enforcement, ICE, agents, which instructs them to enter ESD property and for what purpose. And further, be it resolved that the Board of Directors directs the superintendent to withhold permission to access students while at school without an authorized warrant from INS or ICE. So with this, what you would be basically ensuring that I do, or telling me to do, is to create a procedure for our schools and sites so that if ICE or INS does come, or another federal agency that's not a local law enforcement agency, right? That if they came to the school, that everybody in the front office would know what to do, which would be to demand to see the warrant, to call the superintendent's office or my designee. It'll be either me or HR. Well, it will be me, and then HR would be a backup. And we will ensure that the right documentation is in place, or tell the officers that we have policy and procedure and a resolution that directs them that they cannot enter the premises. So that's what will occur after the board takes this action. Also, what would occur is that we would work with our families and community partners who support families from different nationalities and immigration statuses of what we're doing to make sure that school is the most safe place for them. Also, I will help other districts as I do, other district leaders to think about and take similar actions. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board? I just want to make sure that we are doing this on behalf of our facilities that the Northwest Regional ESD has, not on behalf of any other school districts.
Of course. Yes, Madam Chair.
And I did want to add, in the absence of our board member Russell, who could not be with us this evening, she really wanted me to share with the group of how much she appreciates the thought that was put into this and how much she appreciates that this board would be looking at taking a stand on this. Any other comments? All right, with that, is there a motion?
So moved, and also on behalf of Dorian, I'm sure she would appreciate that as well.
It's been moved. Second?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded that the board adopt resolution 25-004, protections for students at schools regardless of immigration status. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes unanimously. Our final resolution of the evening is resolution 25-005, interfund loan of Antioch project. And we have Jordan presenting.
Sorry, I just had to change my audio settings, get to the right microphone. Thank you, Chair Timchuk and members of the board. I think it was maybe 2 months ago, maybe a month ago, I don't remember. I let the board know that we did not receive the early learning infrastructure grant. And that was a critical component, not that specific grant, but throughout the entire project for the Antioch building, part of the budget has been the anticipation of state grants. And we will continue pursuing grants. In the notice we got from the state that we were not selected for the infrastructure grant, we were informed that the grant did meet the requirements of the grant. And so the project is a qualified project for the grant. There were just other projects that were prioritized over ours. So we will resubmit when the next round of funding opens up this spring. For that grant, we are also working on direct funding requests as part of the appropriations process with the state budget. So we will continue looking for those other opportunities, but from the outset of this project, the contingency plan for if we did not receive grants was to use proceeds from either the lease or the sale of the current Hillsborough Early Childhood Center facility to finish the Antioch renovation project. So the purpose of this loan, it's an interfund loan from our general fund to our capital projects fund. It is very much an accounting thing. Our cash and investments are commingled. They don't sit in different places. This is part of governmental fund accounting that we keep track of these things in different places. But importantly, where the board has appropriated resources for this project is in our capital projects fund and not in our general fund. And so we need to move funds as we record them from our general fund to our capital projects fund in order to finish this project this spring. Doing it this way keeps the accounting for the full cost of this facility very neat and transparent, so that we don't split up where we are keeping track of what it costs to acquire and then renovate the facility. One thing I did want to point out, there's a typo in the cover sheet for this item that lists the term as June 30, 2028. But in section 3 of the resolution, It is June 30, 2034. The resolution is correct, so there's no amendment needed to the resolution. The reason that we are putting the term out to 2034 and not doing a shorter term is because it gives us the opportunity to lease the facility or to use it for a different program if there is a more appropriate use for it than surplusing. Just as a matter of process, if we were to sell the building, we would go through a process where first we would ask the board to declare the facility surplus. Then we would engage with our realtor of record, which is Colliers, to list the facility. We would receive offers for it. Those offers would then come back before the board for the board to select the offer that they wanted us to accept, and then we would divest of the asset. So there are multiple steps and with board involvement along the way before we surplus and divest of a real estate asset like that building. And so we are asking for the statutory maximum term of 10 years, which gives us the opportunity to lease the building out or to use it for other internal programs if appropriate, and to use proceeds from those activities to repay this loan. Similar to Superintendent Goldman, I did not intend to read the entire resolution because it is a long resolution. Of course, I am happy to do so, Chair Timchuk, if you would like me to read it into the record.
Is there any objections to not being read fully into the record? Yes, Maureen.
So no objection.
Okay.
But Jordan did an excellent job of walking through, but I just would like to go back to a couple points that he made to accentuate the fact that these dollars are capital dollars that are required to be used on facilities, and that general operating funds have not been used in this process. And I would just like to emphasize that this evening before we move forward to the resolution. So thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
Also wanted to make sure that we clarified that there's not, by taking out this loan, we're not taking any money from our general fund to float the project as we wait for, that's correct, right?
We will be using funds from our general fund balance while
Yes.
we wait for other proceeds.
This is a transfer from the general fund to the capital projects. What it is not the use of the EIECSE contract for operations of the program.
Correct.
So this is from the general ESD, from our general fund budget.
Okay, and then if we do not get this that we're expecting, then we will look at the next step down the road of looking at the HECC building when we're not using that anymore, and go through all of those steps of declaring it surplus and selling, and then the proceeds from that would go back to replenish the funds that we took. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the resolution, as it's written, calls for repayment with a rate of 4.85%, which was the most recent rate of return in the local government investment pool, which means that the general fund will be made whole, not just in the amount borrowed, but also on any interest lost while these funds were utilized for this purpose.
Chris.
Jordan, it might be also useful to mention what you told us in the bond meeting the other day about Collier's estimate of the value of the HEC building, because that might make people feel more comfortable.
Thank you. Yes, we did have the facility assessed for real market value, so this is not a full appraisal, but it's similar. I shouldn't say it's similar, but the analogy that I like to use is it's kind of like when a residential realtor looks at comps in a neighborhood when they're trying to figure out how to, what to offer on a residential property. It's a very similar process where they look at other commercial facilities in the same geographic footprint and for the same types of zoning and use and things like that. And the real market value estimate that they provided to us is $3.6 million. So we are very confident that that facility can more than cover this loan.
Any other questions or concerns or? All right, do I have a motion?
I move we approve the transfer of funds for the NWR building.
In earnest, you good with
Yeah.
seconding? Okay, great. It's
Yeah,
been
second.
properly moved and seconded that we approve the resolution 25-005, the interfund loan for Antwalk project. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? With that, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Jordan, for the presentation.
Thank you, board.
All right, our last order of business, board member comments. Yeah, the only thing I will add is, you know, this advocacy work is a team sport. And I appreciate the great team that we have and all the great work. We're definitely going to have our work cut out for us with the session starting. But I am happy to be a great cheerleader on this team of advocacy. So with that, we look forward to seeing those of you that can attend tomorrow's legislative session. And we are adjourned for this evening.